Um, Welcome back to our intro to critical race theory. We will be discussing our recap of our instruction. Plus, we will be going on a path forward for those who want to go into some more advanced studies. Because as an introductory course, the intent of this class was not to make anyone an expert on critical race theory, but to provide a foundation and a groundwork to be built upon. One of those foundations would be using the theory to its logical conclusion and asking questions that only you can create. So, as a final lesson, it would be, where do you see critical race theory 25 years from now? Where do you see race relations in America 25 years from now? And then write those things down that you see. And then when you write down what you see, talk to other people about it. See if your list looks like their list. And then you can discuss with them why there might be a difference or why we are not seeing the same thing in order to reconcile our visions. You know, when I was looking at the playoffs yesterday, I noticed that the Washington team was winning pretty convincingly. However, I was thinking about it, looking far ahead. If the Washington Commanders, do go to the Super Bowl and win, they would have to potentially go into, meet the president and go to the White House. And I'm thinking, well, would the team go? Would the team go or feel comfortable going with the rhetoric that has been used primarily in reference to people who have been Black or thinking critically of race? Predominantly a Black team. And what does it say about people who root for Kansas City? And I thought about the dichotomy of that. These warring ideologies that are being played out on the field, but being reconciled, because we know that the NFL is entertainment. And for most of the time, when it comes to race concerns in our country, we see that we are sometimes giving tokenism as if entertainment to create a narrative, to support it. Like some people were saying that the refs are on the side of the Chiefs, where Patrick Mahomes gets all of the calls that goes his way because of who he is. And essentially that kind of operates how racism works. Racists get the calls that others don't get. And it's those little calls that can change the outcomes of entire games. But the game that we're talking about is racism. And as we looked at game theory and competitive and strategies, we're seeing how some people are now making determinations that it's in their self-interest to now play for the team that they think is winning. So you have a lot of people who are now coming out in support of Donald Trump, namely Snoop Dogg, Nelly, Rick Ross, have come out to perform at events for him to make it seem as if he has a broader appeal than he really does. And we know that the media is also complicit in keeping critical race theory and people looking critically into saying, well, yes, you can have an opinion, but if we have an opinion that differs from your opinion, we're ignorant because we don't follow what you say. So, a lot of these artists, predominantly Black artists, their support started off from Black people. Their foundation of their support is Black people. And the only reason that they have an audience or a platform is because Black people have said this person is acceptable. So now they have a platform to go into the white audience for credibility. In the event that they lose the Black audience, then the white audience, if you follow critical race theory, will not need them anymore. They will become cannon fodder, and there'll be people who will put out there without a camp, because they will not be accepted or welcomed because you consort with people who do not understand our plight here, who are adversarial to people who look like you. And you are being used as a Trojan horse to speak to more ignorant people about how to keep them enslaved. Because if a rich Black person in America came out and says, look, I'm a slave, but I got these gold diamond chains on. Look at all this gold and diamond on my grills. You'll be like, oh, I want to be a slave too. Because the idea of iconography and supremacy is important. But let's say academia. There's nobody there with a PhD who's trying to understand and talk policy. You have ignorant people perpetuating ignorant ideas who getting money, and they become Judas. Now, when it comes to theory, an introduction to a theory, what you have to say is, where do we take this theory to its logical conclusion? And what does that actually mean? What it means is that I only see the world forward, but I see it backwards. I don't know what happens ahead of me, but I know what's happened behind me. And this is what Kierkegaard said, that we live life backwards going forward. And in order to understand what that really means, it's that there were Black people in the convention of 1879 who were advocating for the racial segregation of their people because it would benefit them personally. There were Black people who were advocating in 1890s that Black people be inferior because it helped them personally. And it will help you personally. That's why when Judas betrayed himself for 30 pieces of silver, the question is not enough, nor is the world enough. Because the ideologies that they share are detrimental, because the guy says, hey, I want to be a dictator on day one. Like, you believe that? No, nobody wants to be a dictator for one day, because power is intoxicating. And so what will happen, and the reason that I wanted to finish this course prior to the inauguration on January 20th is because any platform that will be used to potentially shed light to wake people up or target with agendas can and will probably be curtailed. Now, what does that mean? It means shadow banning. What does it mean? It means that people will do things to dismiss, or they will try to have intellectual conversations with the majority outstate and then say, hey, we won, your ideas are invalid because we won an election. You winning an election does not validate an idea or a theory or a worldview, because my worldview had already captured what you would see into it. So now we become the narrative. We tell the story, encountering the narrative of the house Negro versus the field Negro. Whether I am not going to kowtow to European interest because they will provide me better chicken. And ultimately, not wanting what they provide has become the biggest challenge for Black progress and critical theories in America. When you do not want what your oppressor offers you, then you can now say, I am free. I don't want your Emmy. I don't want your Grammy. I don't want your Tony. I don't want your award. I don't want the things that you provide me. And this goes back into a worldview that if I get validation from you, then you can ultimately validate and externally validate me. And when you're validated by people who have an interest in your ignorance, then you will be used as a pawn and a token for the subjugation of an ignorant people. And I think that is the biggest challenge we run in today. You know, I see us today at a place where Justice Earl Warren, Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, Earl Warren, was the Attorney General in California during the Japanese internment. And it was some of his arguments that were used to justify the internment. And he said that when it came to the Caucasian race, you know, we have ways and measures to be able to differentiate the Germans and the Italians, who we were at war with. We were at war with Germans and Italians. And if we want to be honest, there were more people of German and Italian ancestry in America during World War II. However, did we intern the Germans in America because they could be subversive to German teachings? No, he said that they had assimilated into our culture enough so that we do not fear them. Whereas the Japanese had not assimilated into their culture enough, so they still feared them. And because they feared them, they wanted them locked into what was called concentration camps. And if you read about these stories, they were very brutal. These camps, they were treated horribly. Property was stolen from them. They were evacuated from their homes with very little notice as a war measure. And then Roosevelt came out and said, hey, you know what, this is a war measure, signed an executive order. And it was Warren in California who was the staunchest advocate for that. Now, let's look at that today, because we look at history backwards and say all we had to do is say, hey, these Haitians are eating people and we don't know them. They speak a different language and dialect than us. So what should we do to protect ourselves from them? Well, we should intern them, put them in camps. Let's call them detention camps, but let's give them no human rights. Let's give them no human decency. And when we dehumanize people under the critical race theory, we have opened up the genocidal cycle. And in the genocidal cycle, it starts off with you're not a person. You're not a person. You are something to be used for my power. You are to divide and to conquer. And when you see people who come to power with no competence, they need power to hide their ignorance, because America just gave the smallest bully in the world the largest bully pulpit. One more time. America gave the smallest bully in the world the largest bully pulpit, because when you use your platform to reach millions to talk bad about people, what you are doing is indicating your character. You know, there is a time when people talked about, you know, let's all get behind the individual that's in charge and let's support our leaders. But if they want you to be enslaved, I say no. No, don't get behind them. Get away from them. Oppose them and become the resistance. Ooh, resistance. Now, what is resistance? Resistance is when you say, you draw a line in the sand and say, this you shall not cross. We all have to draw lines, because when they draw the lines around color, the people who look like you will be captured into that line. You know, there was a problem after the Civil War when Black people would roam freely throughout the country. Freely. Yes. It caused panic. I just watched a video in Ohio of a Black man who went into his home and a white woman came to his doorbell, accused him of not living there. This wasn't 1840s. This wasn't 1940s. This is 2025. And he had a Ring camera, and the woman, white woman, we don't know her name, we'll call her Karen or Miss Ann, whichever you prefer, said, I don't believe you live here. Now, my thought is, what you believe or do not believe is not relevant to the conversation that we are discussing. If you believe something, leave the belief at your church and in your house. But when you come into the public sphere, let's use knowledge. Let's use understanding. But so often we can say what we believe because we know that our beliefs are held by a lot of other people. And what the critical race theory would say is that I am not here to argue what you believe. You know, in the one takeaway, if you take nothing away from this course, I want you to believe nothing. Because belief, it comes back to the word opinion and think. I don't want you to think of anything. I want you to examine. It was Socrates who said the unexamined life is not worth living. Examine your worldview and say, what do I need for my worldview to be intact? What do I need for my mental health? And when it comes to critical race theory, we see the consciousness of Du Bois talked about, the dual consciousness being connected, being torn asunder by two warring ideas. Who am I? The central question of the African in America is, who am I? There are some Africans who want to be Americans. America is a nationality. It's a country. And you can be American by birthright. The same way Earl Warren, there were Japanese citizens who were born in America, but they did not have the birthright privilege because they were suspicious, because they had a culture that was different. It's the culture. It's for the culture, people say. It's the culture. Do you want to be like them or not like them? It was the great 21st century philosopher and poet Kendrick Lamar who said they are not like us. But when he's saying they are not like us, what is he saying? What he's saying is that the ideas and the cultures and the values that they instill, we do not share. We don't think we should exploit people for personal political gain. We don't think we should demonize groups of people in order to get power and lie, because we believe if you do that, you have to continue to do it and you have to ramp it up because you have become so incompetent that your ignorance has become authoritarian. You know, the Alien and the Seditions Act of 1793 one of the legislations that they're talking about. You know, when conservatives are talking about the 1700s, I'm often reminded of what was the status of Black people in these times, because it lets me know that psychologically that they're okay with us going back into those times. We did talk earlier about Dr. Francis Cress Welsing, who talked about the keys to the kingdom and racism. And it's not an American phenomenon. You know, racism is not an American issue. It's an oligarchical issue when wealthy European men wanted to control other people's men, and they knew that ignorance was the only way to protect them from their paranoia. Ignorance protects them from their paranoia because they understand if you wake up and ask question, why does 1% of people control 99% plus of all of the wealth, then you would be suspicious. And you might ask questions. Why aren't my elected officials doing anything about this disparity? Oh, because those elected officials are getting money from these people. Oh, boom, light bulb comes on. Now we need to remove those people from power and get new people in power. Well, how do you remove people from power when they have incumbency? And we already know how hard it is to remove an incumbent, because it takes money to get a message out, which is why I'm not concerned about having millions of viewers, because if it takes money to get your message out, then the idea has to be priceless. If money is needed to get your message out, then your ideas should be priceless. They should be free and they should be given to others, because great ideas become contagious. Great ideas become infectious. And when a great idea gets out there, there needs to be a platform to spread and propagate the idea so that it is preached. So why was TikTok temporarily banned? Because people will ban any process that will allow you to take their power from them. Let me say that one more time. People will ban any process, platform, product that will stop power from leaving their hands, no matter what, without exception. That is critical thinking. They will stop YouTube. They will stop Facebook. They will stop Instagram. Any medium that will allow you to consolidate power of disinfected, marginalized, or oppressed people will be used to divide and conquer. And then you will have people who look like you on these platforms spouting their talking points. It's amazing to me. The chicken cannot taste that good. Now, I've had some good chicken, but it can't be that good. That yard bird, I don't care what kind of sauce you put on there, it can't be that good. We'll eat tuna fish today. So that being said, you know, I'm reminded, because it is King Day coming up, and I, coordinated the ideas of King into this course. The last book that King wrote, Where Do We Go From Here, Community or Chaos? I posed this question last year, and I think we've chosen chaos. And I don't want to alarm people when I say chaos in the negative sense, because chaos can come from a place that only brings order. And the chaos that I see happening, and the last idea in this book that King talked about, Dr. King talked about, was the housing crisis in this country. He was talking in the 1960s about private ownership and how companies and corporations would come in and buy the property. And he said that the same way we need Medicaid for health, we need a housing aid to keep corporations out of our homes so that the American dream can be affordable, and the economic disadvantages. And when we talk about economy and critical race theory, this is where the rubber meets the road. It's about money. That's what it's about. It's about power. It's all about racism, about power and money. All that other, you don't like me and I don't like you, and that's bigoted and history, that's prejudice and bigotry. Racism is a system and a process to control the wealth and resources from people who have no melanin. That's what it is. To keep power in the hands of a few at the cost of many, and racism just became that tool. That's it. But as we see how that tool has been used in such a constructive and destructive way, It is now to use that tool to say we need solidarity. Oftentimes I hear people talk about unity, and I say no. Unity means I have to agree with you, and sometimes when I don't share your view, have to be quiet when I don't. That's unifying. There are people I don't agree with personally that are Black, but you will not hear me be negative about them if they have a pro-Black agenda. Let me say that one more time. There are Black people who I personally disagree with some of their philosophies, but I will not disparage them if they are trying to explain a phenomenon that I might disagree with, because that's what critical race theory is for. Going back to our first lesson, it's to explain a phenomenon. And when you don't have an explanation for a phenomenon, you tend to look to others who have one. If somebody kept winning the lottery all the time, somebody might ask them, well, what is your strategy for playing the lottery? How do you pick numbers? What are you doing? And, as a person who did not want to talk about my personal upbringing or my need to teach this course, is that necessity sometimes creates urgency that aligns with interest, and they can converge for the purpose of intersecting for better understanding. I don't think of this course as the advanced level, because the advanced level is you doing it yourself. It's you asking the tough questions of race and asking, who am I in it? What role should I play in racism? If I play any role, am I going to be anti-racism? How do I define racism? When Dr. Kendi said that racism is not about individuals, it's about ideas, I think it was a game changer. Dr. Ibram Kendi is a game changer with racist thinking. He's writing books about children and how to talk to them about race. These are scholars, at the advanced level. I would share with you all the conversations that I have with my child about race. I would bring her on this episode at the advanced levels and let her talk to you. She's 11 years old, but let her tell you how she sees race. Is she seeing it from a narrow view or a wide view? Because I need her to understand a world that I will not be in one day. And if I am not going to be in that world one day, I need her to have the biggest lens and aperture to know how to move in a room full of vultures, in a room full of people who look like her but do not share her interests. It was the Black boule. The boule were the Black people who were the cupbearers to the king. It was those ones who would explain to the white people when the Negroes were becoming restless. They were thermometers, they were temperature gauges, and they would report back the discontent to the European planter ruling class, the master, so to speak. And these were the ones who got better chicken. But when they went and reported back, sometimes we'd have to give them false reports. We'd have to tell them everything is okay because we knew they were snakes. We knew they had their own self-interest at heart. They were not concerned about the interests of people who look like them because they saw that there was more beneficial to be in the house of the master. When it was cold outside in the wintertime, master allowed the furnace to keep them a little warmer. And the creature comforts of life would tell people, don't be Judas. And I say that because the word hypocrite comes from the word actor. Someone who is playing a role, someone who's playing a position, someone who is trying to get over on you something, someone who has an agenda that is not in your self-interest. Now, to those who oppose, I will say this. Good faith arguments we want. We want good faith arguments. But analysis can create paralysis if you do not hear what is being said to you. The idea that someone is asking you or requesting an action from you is not what critical race theory is. It is a lens, is an introductory lens to see the world and to say, hey, you know what? You've been telling me stories. You told me Abraham Lincoln freed people. And then I learned what emancipation really was, is the transfer of ownership. See, that was a lie. But you didn't know you were lying to me. It's just a good story. It's a, something that Ulysses S. Grant said in this country, if there's ever another civil war in America, it won't be between Mason and Dixon. It will be superstition and ignorance. The ignorance that is so pervasive, willful, complicit, and those who are not, who know better, who try to act as if the complaints or the concerns that critical race theory is addressing are not valid, deserve nor time nor discussion. In 2025, you will not be discussed. We will move beyond you. You exist as a splinter for the purpose of bogging down the conversation that produces nothing, as if people from the Tulsa Race Massacre are not still alive today at 106 years old. And if they can't get justice, make the argument for me. See, and the countering of a narrative is only powerful insofar as you understand the narrative. I don't need to counter the American narrative because I am it. It was something that Du Bois, talked about when he said dual consciousness of Black people in America. Du Bois talked about he had to wrestle with his own double consciousness, that I am Harvard educated, that I am in a space that people do not understand. I do have a lens of being close to white people, because he wrote The Souls of Black Folks, but then he also wrote, almost 20 years later, The Souls of White Folks too. He said, I was uniquely positioned to see them in their hypocrisy. I am uniquely positioned to see how they say one thing and then do something else, because he didn't know he was Black until he went to the South. The scholar denied. Scholarship is denied because the Eurocentric worldview has this idea where if it did not originate from the mind of a European, it is not valid. Now, critical race theory rejects this idea. It says that if it did come from the mind of a European, it's probably not only invalid, it probably lacks the validity, because the European mind has an interest in the Black ignorance. So critical race theory then comes along to say, hey, let me tell you why this point of view could be biased, why this perspective of looking at the world can have a negative inference, because this country in America would have universal health care if it wasn't Black people here. Now, disagree with that, and I will show you the evidence. America would have a better social safety net if it wasn't for Black people. If 77% of the people in the county where I live in that are homeless are Black, but if you don't tell me why that 77% of the homeless people in a population that is not overwhelmingly county that is Black are Black, then why? Explain the phenomenon to me. But you can't. And not only can you not do it, you have to now create arguments that are on their face spurious, they're lies, that they are disingenuous, they're intellectually dishonest, and they do not allow good faith discourse. They're bad faith arguments. And when it comes time to talk about the path ahead, at the advanced level of theory, you walk it. At the advanced level of theory, you see how does a Black person in America move in spaces and have peace in their mind and connect their consciousness. Now, at the vibrational level, the highest level we have is authentic. To be authentic, to be you, to not try to make someone see the world how you see it. And so often, it's not been my intent to make you see the world through my lens, through my upbringing, but who I am becomes important to what I say. Because in the event that there is a disconnect between what I am saying and what I am doing, the question should be asked is why? What am I doing to spread, propagate messaging of positivity? Well, the first thing I'm doing is creating a course to introduce people to critical race theory. I'm introducing people to an idea and a worldview that how you have seen the world your whole life is not invalid. If you were born in a racist place in a racist country, I've had many conversations with white people about racism in the country. Some have told me that, that my town is so racist that the chief of police is a grand wizard of the KKK. The what? I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I wonder what that looks like when the chief of police is the grand wizard. Oh, okay. But you see what I mean? I don't say that's a horrible thing. That's his worldview. That's how he came from. And when we understand someone's worldview, we'll understand that there's an acronym that I've created in understanding people. It's called STOVE. And this is what you need for a safe space. The S is for safe space. The T is for transparency. The O is for open-mindedness. V is vulnerability. And the E is emotional intelligence. Now, we know stoves are hot. And if you don't have this mechanism in place, you don't know when I am out of my depth in a conversation. I need to sit back and learn right now. I look forward to learning what is the next lesson. People think that a PhD is a terminal degree, meaning there is no more further knowledge. That is the furthest thing from the truth. Ever since I got a PhD, the first thing I had to understand is I had been looking at things from one perspective. That's it. I just had one way of looking at the world. That's it. My Judeo-Christian upbringing, my Muslim upbringing, my international upbringing were always separate because they were different experiences of an event, but they were not reconciled. The kids today have this term called crashing out. That's like when you're about to fight or something, you're about to crash out. Like I'm about to lose it. And crashing, to me, has become this weird idea of fighting, of intersectionality that Kimberly Crenshaw talks about. Is we're intersection. It's like playing chicken. We're both coming at each other, and then somebody is going to have to turn. And in the event that neither of us turn, we're going to crash. And that's called crashing out. Now, my thought process is you can go first. I don't want to crash with anybody unless they want to crash with me. Now, if you want to crash with me, I need to see you well ahead of time. Some people are very obvious that they don't want dialogue. They don't want to share experiences. They want to demagogue. They want to sit above the issue, talk down on the issue as if you are incapable of understanding what they're trying to say. Well, if you only just saw the world from my perspective, and I agree with that. And I'd say, listen, you want to crash out with me? That's fine. But I got a Mack truck and you got a punch buggy or one of those little cars that can't withstand crash. And because your car can't withstand it, I am not going to hit you with the Mack truck. I'm going to park it. It's your choice now to make a decision. But the lanes are blocked. And when it comes to what Sun Tzu said, always give people an outlet. And I would encourage, for the listeners of this course, when you're having discussions about race that are getting heated, that are getting adversarial, don't feel the need to engage. Find where you're at first emotionally. See, am I okay? I was at my place of employment, and someone told me, that all black men like blonde-haired white women. Like they're our kryptonite, our weakness. And I thought to myself, like, is that racist? Probably not. It's probably just trying to be familiar. And I thought about it and I said, what if it's the opposite? What if that's what you're saying to justify your belief? But whether or not you're saying it to justify your belief or not, what does it say for me not to respond to it in real time? I'm going to make you uncomfortable. Because in order to be a student, it's pain application. And as you want to learn more, you're going to have to challenge people, some who are older than you, some who have been living longer than you, and they've never developed critical thinking. One of the reasons why I believe the Bible talks about sheep is because sheep can't critically think. Sheep lack discernment. Sheep need a shepherd. And I think that was the idea for black people in this country. The idea, which is why I think church is so heavily relied upon in our communities, is because you're never supposed to think critically. You're not. Because then you would have asked the pastor a question. You might ask the question of the pastor, like, why aren't we using this church for empowerment to combat racism in this country? Why aren't our organizations and religious faith combating white supremacy? Why are you bowing down to white Christian nationalism whose Jesus supports you being in chains? They won't, because they are going to get better chicken. The organizations and societies that were brought in this country for the purpose of race control, especially now, are being exposed. The boule, it's the black people who don't want other black people living around them because they think that other black people will tarnish their esteem that they built. And that's a sad commentary, but it is an assimilation tactic. It's what Martin Delaney talked about. It's how we would be independent. To be self-determination is important. Whether it be critical race theory in the future, as I would see it, as we become more free and there's less paternalism on there, where one white person can't speak on behalf of 42 million black people as if they are some kind of expert or authority on a population they know nothing about. Then we will be able to have ideological differences and commonality of purpose. And that's where I wanted to leave it with. We disagree ideologically, but I'm going to do what the white folks do when they disagree ideologically. You can be a white person that does not support white supremacy, but you're silent about it. You say nothing about it. Okay, that's your prerogative. Well, black people should do the same thing. If a black nationalist movement wants to go and start their own settlement in a state somewhere, like the Mormons did, or the Latter-day Saints, or the Amish, or whatever, and they want to identify as foundational black Americans or American descendants of slavery, then that is their prerogative. But if the other black folks want to assimilate with you all and do y'all thing, then that's the thing. But the problem is, and you all know this, that if those black people were not doing that thing, who is going to be monitoring them? Who's going to be making sure that they're not growing, that they're not providing their own communities in the commune, and they're not taking care of each other and creating their own healthcare systems, their own schools, their own hospitals? Because then what you would have is what Chief Justice Earl Warren's always tried to prevent in this country, which was an insurgency of people into America who were foreign, not foreign born, who you were to say had constitutional rights and protections, but you were just lying to them. Because if they had constitutional rights and protections, then you would treat them like the KKK. And although they're a hate group who may hate black people, you leave them alone. If there was a group right now that said, I hate white people and they were black and we don't want to be associated with them, you should leave them alone like the KKK's left alone. Now, when you don't speak about the KKK, but talk about the black nationalists, then you are telling me you're racist. That's okay. We're not arguing with you anymore. Be racist, but don't be a coward about it. Be open. Say, hey, I'm a racist. Say, I think because of your color, your skin, you're inferior. I think that because I'm a white person and the only thing I have was no melanin, I'm superior to you in some way, but I have no way to prove it, articulate it without me controlling the whole system that I created for the purpose of your inferiority, to include economics, law, legislation, policy, sex, religion, war, academics, education, etc. Because once the colonizer controls your educational system, the rest is a wrap. And that's the goal of this course. I am under no obligation to teach this. I'm getting no money from any institution. I am of my own free will, taking my own time out on my weekend to provide this information to you because, like I said, the colonizer, once they take over your educational system, it's good night. It's a wrap. Because in order to break free from it, in order to break free from your current worldview without a new worldview to go into, it's called psychosis. You have lost touch with your reality. Critical race theory is a new reality. It is a new way of seeing your world. It's a new world. It's a whole new world. And because it's a new world, you have to lose sometimes the old things in the previous world to bring in the new world. And sometimes in the Bible, it says putting old wine in new wine skins. You know, you can ruin them both because sometimes the things from your old world are not compatible. Now, don't get me wrong. There are things in your old world that can be compatible with your new world and vice versa, and some diametrical. But to find out the compatibility, what we have to do is ask the question. And then sometimes there's hard lessons. There's mistakes that are going to be made because people are generally good and well-intended, but they may not know how to have discussions about race in this country. That's why, you know, when I talk to people now, I lean more to saying European as opposed to white. Because sometimes when you say white to people, they get defensive. Like, oh, I don't know why I feel the need to defend whiteness. Because that's the psychology of it. It's the greatest propaganda the world has known. And so I defend no theory. Don't need to defend a theory because greater defenders have already defended it. Like if the world's greatest chess player played chess with you, Dr. Derek Bell, the inventor, founder of critical race theory, one of the greatest legal minds this country's produced. And his thinking is so pervasive that it exists beyond his living. He's dead, but his thinking is still present. What thoughts will outlive you? And as you think about what thoughts will outlive you, and as we go forth in this new administration, you know, take the time to learn as much about what they're going to be banning as quickly as possible, because it will be needed. You will be an asset, not a liability. Because the burning of the book starts the process, but it's the ideas they want to fight. That's why they burn the people second. The burning of the books is just the ideas. It's the ideas they cannot burn. Ideas do not burn. They are not perishable. Ideas are infinite. Ideas are eternal, like the ideas of God, the ideas of something supreme. And when it comes to theory, I would encourage you all to examine your current way of living. Ask yourself, what theory do I work under? Because you do. You may not know it, but there's a theory. It could be Christian, it could be Muslim, it could be Buddhist, it could be Taoism. But there's a theory, there's a way, a foundational underpinning of your life. And all I'm saying is make sure it's sturdy. Because when the storms of life come, which they automatically will they sustain you or will they fall? Will they find you lacking? And with that, I will say, I appreciate everyone who will listen to this course, who has. More is to come. Be encouraged, because we have something that they cannot take. and that is knowledge of self.